But the African Democratic Congress and the spokesperson is calling on the federal government to immediately clarify the true nature of an alleged coup plot involving arrested military officers.
What if I told you that on October 25th, 2025, a secret plan was set in motion inside Nigeria's military, a plan to overthrow President Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself? This wasn't fiction. It wasn't rumor. It was real. A group of officers and civilians had come together with one goal: to end Tinubu's presidency by force. But before their plan could even begin, it was exposed. The plot collapsed, and the alleged masterminds were arrested. The coup had failed. But what came next was even more shocking. When the news broke, millions of Nigerians didn't celebrate the government's victory. Instead, social media exploded with reactions that stunned the world. Ordinary citizens openly wishing the coup had succeeded. What does it say about a country when people begin to prefer the risk of military rule over the reality of democracy? What does it reveal about Nigeria's growing anger, frustration, and exhaustion under Tinubu's leadership? In today's video, we're diving deep into the failed coup attempt, who planned it, how it was uncovered, the government's desperate response, and the chilling reaction from the Nigerian people themselves. Because behind the headlines lies a bigger question: is Nigeria reaching its breaking point? The last time Nigeria was under military rule was between 1998 and 1999, led by General Abdul Salami Abubakar. He would become the man who handed power back to the people, transferring authority to a newly elected president, Olusegun Obasanjo, on May 29, 1999. That day was meant to mark a new beginning, a promise that the dark years of military rule were finally over. Because let's be honest, those years were brutal. Under leaders like General Sani Abacha, Nigeria witnessed repression, fear, and silence. Voices were crushed, journalists disappeared, citizens lived in constant fear of their own government. So when democracy returned, it came with a vow: never again. Never again would soldiers rule from behind the barrel of a gun. But more than 2 decades later, that promise feels fragile. Since 1999, Nigeria has been ruled by civilian presidents, supposedly chosen by the people every 4 or 8 years. But here's the truth few dare to say out loud: most elections have never truly reflected the people's choice. They've been marred by manipulation, intimidation, and power plays by the political elite, the same figures who refuse to let go of the throne. And with such a tight grip on power, few ever imagined a coup could even happen again in Nigeria. In fact, just months ago, when coups swept across the Sahel region, in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, President Bola Tinubu made a calculated move. He paid a high-profile visit to the Nigerian army, shaking hands, smiling for cameras, and assuring the generals of his confidence in their loyalty. But beneath the surface, everyone knew what that visit really meant. Tinubu was trying to keep them close, to calm the storm before it ever reached Abuja. So when the news broke, it felt like a thunderclap. A few days ago, headlines across Nigeria screamed one word: coup. Authorities revealed that a plot to overthrow President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had been thwarted before it could unfold. The details were murky at first, but as the hours passed, a darker picture began to emerge. This wasn't the work of a few rogue soldiers. It was bigger. Reports suggested that both military officers and influential politicians from both the North and South had been quietly working together. Inside the corridors of power, whispers spread. Could this really be happening again? Soon after, the Nigerian Defence Headquarters stepped forward. They confirmed the arrest of 16 military officers accused of what they called unprofessional conduct. Among those detained were senior officers, men with access to critical bases, command networks, and intelligence systems. These weren't foot soldiers, they were insiders. The investigation, led by the Defense Intelligence Agency, quickly expanded. All 3 branches of the Nigerian Armed Forces were pulled in to support the probe, tracing every connection, every message, every meeting that might lead to the heart of the conspiracy. And then came the real twist. This wasn't just a military affair. The scope of the investigation extended far beyond the barracks, reaching into the civilian elite, politicians, businessmen, and possibly even members of the ruling party. Nigeria hadn't seen a story this explosive in decades. A coup had been planned. It failed, but its echoes were just beginning to shake the country. As investigators dug deeper, the story took an even darker turn. According to multiple local reports, a prominent Southern politician had come under scrutiny, accused of financing the entire operation. But that wasn't all. Some of those being questioned were said to have ties to royal families and powerful political dynasties. These weren't outsiders trying to destabilize the state. They were people deeply embedded in Nigeria's elite, the kind of individuals who attend the same banquets, the same meetings, and exchange the same handshakes as the country's most powerful figures. If true, it meant the conspiracy wasn't just about soldiers plotting in secret. It might have been an inside job involving the very people sworn to protect democracy. No formal charges have been filed yet, but sources close to the Defense Intelligence Agency confirmed that surveillance, interrogations, and wiretaps are still underway to uncover every hidden layer of the plot. The identities of the 16 detained officers remain classified, but insiders say they come from multiple branches of the armed forces: the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Nigeria's security agencies are now operating at heightened alert, locking down key installations and quietly monitoring communications to prevent any chain reaction. Then came another leak. A senior source alleged that a former governor had provided funds to help organize the coup, a plot reportedly scheduled to take place on October 25th. He revealed, yes, that is true. There are civilian accomplices, including a former governor, but the extent of their involvement is still under investigation. For now, there are 16 officers involved and in custody. If this statement proves accurate, it would mean one chilling thing. The coup wasn't just a military rebellion. It was a multi-layered conspiracy, reaching from the barracks to the very heart of Nigeria's political power. The deeper investigators went, the more tangled the web became. Sources close to the probe revealed that the former civilian governor now under investigation once worked in the oil and gas sector, one of Nigeria's most powerful and politically charged industries. His exact role in the alleged coup remains unconfirmed, but investigators are zeroing in on his recent communications and financial transactions. Every call, every meeting, every unexplained deposit is now under the microscope. According to insiders, if credible links between the former governor and the detained officers are found, he will be formally summoned for interrogation. And then came another revelation. Among the 16 arrested officers, one was allegedly a brigadier general, a man of rank, respect, and reach. Another, a colonel, belongs to a family so influential that their name alone carries weight in Nigeria's power circles. When the news broke, the colonel's relatives were reportedly shaken. One family member told reporters, "Our prayer is that they are not found guilty of the allegation. This wasn't some fringe rebellion. This was power turning on itself." Local media now report that more officers have been quietly picked up for questioning, men and women linked either directly or indirectly to the coup's blueprint. And it doesn't stop with the military. Investigators are also tracking the movements of several politicians, both from the north and the south, who are suspected of playing background roles in the scheme. In the halls of government, tension is thick. Phones are being tapped. Meetings are being watched. Every whisper could be evidence. Every handshake, a clue. Because if these suspicions are true, this wasn't just an attempt to seize power. It was a potential alliance between political money, military muscle, and old family influence, the kind of combination that could shake Nigeria to its core. But this is where it gets interesting. 2 days after the news broke out, the Nigerian Defence Headquarters released a statement made by the Director of Defense Information, Brigadier General Tukur Gusau. In the statement, Tukur dismissed the reports of an alleged coup, saying that the detention of the 16 officers was linked to the cancellation of Nigeria's 65th Independence Day by the federal government, and as such, declared that the news of an attempted coup plot was false. It urged the public to disregard the misinformation being circulated by who it described as purveyors of falsehoods and enemies of the nation. The statement read, "The attention of the Defense Headquarters, DHQ, has been drawn to a false and misleading report by an online publication insinuating that the cancellation of activities marking Nigeria's 65th independence anniversary was linked to an alleged attempted military coup." The report also made spurious references to the recent DHQ press release announcing the arrest of 16 officers currently under investigation for professional misconduct. Gusau went on to say that the cancellation of the October 1st anniversary parade was purely administrative. explaining that it was meant to allow President Tinubu to attend a bilateral meeting abroad and enable troops to sustain ongoing operations against insurgency and banditry. While declaring that democracy is forever, Gusau said, "The ongoing investigation involving the 16 officers is a routine internal process aimed at ensuring discipline and professionalism is maintained within the ranks. An investigative panel has been duly constituted and its findings would be made public." But what did the federal government have to say about this? When contacted the following day for the federal government's position on the development, the information minister responded that it was a military affair. The federal government has no reason to doubt the military on what it has said, the minister said. The federal government believes that the armed forces of Nigeria is committed to ensuring the territorial integrity of the country and also strengthening its fight against insecurity. The federal government commends the military, and it will continue to support them in their task of ensuring the security of Nigeria. However, according to a source with insider knowledge, the statement released by the army denying the coup plot is false. The source said that it was carefully crafted after wide consultations with stakeholders. He said, based on the advice by the Attorney General of the Federation, the whole thing was toned down so that it doesn't create apprehension for the citizens, investors, and the international community. This is why no international news media reported that there was a failed coup in Nigeria. The source also added that the statement was doctored to appear routine. However, investigation and prosecution must still take place. The Nigerian Chief of Army Staff went to see Mr. President in Lagos on October 3rd and returned. He showed President Tinubu the preliminary report and the press release before he authorized it. In other words, there really was a plan to orchestrate a coup on October 25th, which would end with the removal of President Tinubu from power. About 16 military officers and other civilian leaders, including a former governor who reportedly financed it, was involved. However, the plan failed after the Nigerian Defence Forces got wind of it, and the 16 military officers were detained and are currently being investigated. Now, as you know, Nigeria is close to the Sahel nations and even shares a border with Niger, where military leaders have taken over through a coup. These countries under the leadership of the coup leaders have turned away from the West and drawn closer to non-Western countries. But, as you know, Nigeria is very close to the West. Each successive government, including that of the current president, has always ensured that the country has a good relationship with the West. In fact, the Nigerian president is said to be a CIA asset as a result of his drug trafficking connections during his time in the US. It's only in recent times under the current US President Donald Trump that there seems to be a little tension between Nigeria and the US. But we all know that Trump has an issue with African countries generally, so that's not even an issue. The main point, however, is that Nigeria is a good ally of the West. Now, given the fact that all the coup-led countries have distanced themselves from the West, the fact is that the Nigerian government would not want to be associated with anything that would hint that they are no longer an ally of the West. This is why the army and the government decided to hide the truth of the failed coup plot to remove Tinubu from power. However, since the news broke out, concerned Nigerian citizens, including the opposition party, have called on the government and the military to come clean and ensure transparency. Some Nigerians took to their social media pages and challenged the military authorities to tell the country the exact offense the 16 officers being held committed. One of them, Adelabi Gabenga, wrote on his Facebook post, "Dear military, kindly avail Nigerians specific offenses these people committed before you kill them. There is no smoke without fire. Breach of service regulations? Tell us the exact breach. Don't put us in darkness. After all, it's our taxes they are using to pay you guys," Ididiong Jackson wrote on X. The National Publicity Secretary of the new Nigeria People's Party, Ladipo Johnson, said Nigerians deserve to know the truth about the alleged coup plot and the nature of the charges against the detained officers. They should let us know what actually happened. We have to know the charges and whether they are facing court-martial or not. So we will know with time whether the military was lying to us or whether the news of soldiers planning a coup is true. Whichever way, we ought to know. That is part of the due process, he said. Similarly, the interim National Publicity Secretary of the Labour Party, Tony Akini, said it was concerning that the military is speaking with two mouths. If it is as severe as we tend to think, then we ought to be cautious in making comments. Because first, the military is speaking with two mouths. Secondly, they said those in detention are there because of some disciplinary measures. Yet, We have sources within the rank and file saying there indeed was an issue of that nature. Coup, he said. He appealed to the military to be courageous, according to the oath of their service, to bring the actual facts to the public so that innocent lives do not suffer. Also weighing in, the national coordinator of the obedient movement worldwide, Dr. Yunusa Tanko, said it was important to verify the authenticity of the alleged coup story before drawing conclusions. First of all, you need to establish the truth of the matter before you can suggest punitive measures. There are people already insinuating that this particular statement is planted in the news by the government in power in order to gain traction, he noted, adding that public discontent over the government's performance may have fueled the rumor. As for ordinary citizens whose lives have been greatly affected negatively since Tinubu came to power, the news of an attempted coup was very much welcomed. In fact, across social media, most Nigerians called on the military to try again. They urged them to orchestrate another coup which would result in Tinubu leaving office. What does this tell you? It means that just like other African countries, Nigerian citizens are tired of the so-called democratic rule which has been in operation since independence. Rather than progress, the country's economic situation seems to worsen by the day. Even the so-called democratic principles are not being implemented in Nigeria. For example, a few days ago, the government ordered the police to tear gas people who came out to protest. And afterwards, the presidency released a statement saying that, even though Nigeria is a democratic country, there are rules that must not be crossed. The question is it no longer constitutional or democratic for citizens to exercise their right to protest? When has it become a crime for citizens of a country to peacefully protest? This is to tell you the kind of state most African countries have deteriorated to. These African leaders never failed to scream democracy, but their actions are anything but democratic. What then is the difference between this so-called democracy and military rule? Isn't it better for Nigeria to be in a military rule than a democratic one? Well, these are the questions that need to be answered. What do you think? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel.